You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP. Hello and welcome to Missed Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may just be punters, but we love to talk. Dodgy weather, tricky decisions, raucous crowds and homeboy heroism. The French Grand Prix had it all as Johann Zarco made history in front of his home fans. As ever, I am your host Kyle Power, and today I'm joined in the virtual shed by some fellow MotoGP enthusiasts. Returning after a week in exile is co-host Jules Seegers. How's it going, Jules?
Hi Kyle, thanks. Good to be back after sitting the last one out on holiday, but what a race to come back to.
Absolutely. It's good you didn't sit this one out. We also joined by tyre-obsessed trumpeter Mad Trumpets. How's it going?
And once again, no lack of tirage to be talking about in this one.
Oh, absolutely. And we're joined by, well, part of the furniture now. It's our token northerner, Danny Henney. How's it going, Danny?
Hey, Kyle. And looking forward to talking to this one. What a race. What a race.
Absolutely crazy weekend. So we'll go into the weekend overview, and I'm going to skip through these bits pretty quickly because we've got a lot to talk about naturally. But going to the weekend overview, we've got Nakagami returns for a wild card, which is really cool, and Jules dropped a bombshell in our group chat just before going online that we'll talk about a bit later with some spicy Jorge Martin news. But the standings, we've got Alex Marquez is leading the championship by 1 point from Marc Marquez, with Bagnaia a further 20 points back, with Morbidelli 56 and Digia 77 points back respectively. So practice and qualifying. There was quite a lot to talk about here, but we'll sort of skim over. So Marc Marquez is on an updated chassis, which the other Ducati riders, all of them will get if it proves nice. And he was half a second faster in the field in FP1. I think that kind of proves the bike was working really well. Fabio Quartararo was looking very, very fast, and Miller too. That new Yamaha engine was looking very good. But somebody who wasn't looking great through practice and quali really was Bagnaia. He made a bit of a hash of quali and ended up P6 on the grid, which is the start of a pretty dismal weekend for him. We'll talk about that later. And all of the Hondas were in Q1. So this started out looking like a disaster weekend for Honda, and wow, how much that turned around. And one person who we never get to talk about, and I want to have a little mention, was Raul Fernandez, getting himself through Q1 and into Q2 for the first time this year, ahead of his teammate Ogura, who crashed and red flagged Q1 and had a bit of a messy weekend. But the big highlight of the Saturday, well, morning at least, was Fabio Quartararo snatching a sensational pole position with an all-time record lap of a 1 minute 29.3. That's an absolute whopping 0.7 faster than Jorge Martin's lap last year. Absolutely bonkers, and the crowd going crazy. The crowd at Le Mans has been amazing. So Quartararo in pole, Marc Marquez in second, Alex Marquez third, Aldeguer a fantastic fourth, Maverick Vinales P5 again being the top KTM, and it's no fluke. Bagnaia only P6 as we move on to the sprint review. So then guys, I'll let you talk now. We're into the sprint review, and this looked like it could have been an epic race for Fabio Quartararo. He set off like a scolded cat and had a pretty much second lead by the end of lap one. Now, did any of you think he could actually go on and win it from here? Danny, you reckon so?
I would say I didn't think he could win it, but I was hoping he would win it. You know, it would have been such a good result. He put in a great lap in qualifying. You know, he looked quite comfortable at the start of the race. He was sitting there, he weren't really being challenged, but you just felt that the riders behind him were managing the pace waiting to strike later in the race. But yeah, I didn't think he could win it, but I would have loved it if he could have pulled it off. It's such a shame that he got done in the end, but yeah, it wasn't to be.
Yeah, Jules, it looked like, I don't know, do you think he set off a bit too hard in those opening laps and hurt his tyre?
Yeah, I think he wanted to protect himself from what happened at Jerez, where he led the race, but within 2 laps, I think, he was just passed by Marquez like he was on a Moto2 bike on one of the short straights, and we know Le Mans has a couple of longer ones, so it felt like he was trying to get pull a gap in those early laps and try to use that as a buffer, a sufficient buffer. But yeah, it wasn't to be so. And the good thing is he has this one lap pace in qualifying and the practices, and that's really promising. And I think we'd never have put any of our money on him on Fabio securing 2 poles in a row. So that's really encouraging, and yeah, it would be really good if he could transfer that to a proper race trim.
Yeah, this is getting to be a habit, and it's a really, really good sign for Yamaha. I did not think he could win the race just because the bike hasn't demonstrated the tire management necessary to sustain that pace for an entire sprint. But what I absolutely loved was the way he just took it to Marquez. Like, everyone was like, "Oh, it's a shame he couldn't really battle," but I'm like, no, that was like some seriously impressive riding, and I was out of my seat cheering just to see someone fighting for something with Marquez.
While he didn't win it, he is starting to hit a bit of form, isn't he? So while he didn't take this one or the previous race, I do think it's not going to be long until Quartararo gets over the line and gets a win. Now, I probably think it's going to be a sprint race rather than a full race because you need some mental conditions. And unfortunately, it was prime for the taking Sunday, but obviously got pipped to it. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be long. I reckon maybe a Misano or something, a bit more of a twistier kind of track, and he'll be right up there and get across the line. It'd be a great story if he can do it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really positive signs. Yeah, the engine is a little step. And actually, it was looking like, I think I put in the notes in our chat that the actual Yamaha engine was looking good. And why he ended up sort of slipping back, yeah, it looked like he, as Jules said, he's pushed really hard to try and get a bit of a buffer. And I think he cooked his soft rear tyre and actually cooked that. But yeah, as Trumpets said, the battle on lap 6 with Mark. So Mark slowly closes him in, and then he lunges into like the first complex, goes a bit wide, and Quartararo just doesn't take anything laying down, shoved it right back up on him, and then Mark had to put in a real hard move into garage there to finally get past him. But then he plummeted. It was 2 laps later, Alex Marquez then passes him, and then 2 laps after that we have a charging Fermin Aldeguer who's like flying up through the field, and he comes through. So he just basically got completely mugged by a trio of Ducatis Trumpet, especially with a dodgy rear tyre and an Yamaha. It didn't look like he stood a chance, really.
Yeah, in fact, it just occurred to me as we were even sitting here, one of the things that can be good or bad for you is setting your tire pressures. And I'm going to bet that the Yamaha technicians are not used to setting tire pressures for being in the lead versus following in dirty air. So that could absolutely have caught him out and them out a little bit. But I think you're right. I would look at the sprint race for them to win because there's simply less management in the lighter bike to start with. It's only a matter of time before they crack that puzzle, and he's going to be fighting all the way to the end with the Ducatis because it looks like it might be a hard bike to ride, but it looks very competitive.
Absolutely. And talking about Ducatis and fighting with, there's an elephant in the room that we haven't mentioned yet. Going on to lap 2, Bagnaia, the sprint jinx has returned from last year. I mean, how many times did he crash out of sprints last year? Quite a lot. Bagnaia loses the front, washes out into turn 2. Well, it was called turn 2-3, but I think it's turn 2. You've got the frightening turn 1, the absolutely frightening turn 1. And Jules, this was disaster for Bagnaia. He's been complaining loads that he doesn't have the front end feeling, and gosh, surely this would just further complicate his issues and his confidence issues.
Yeah, he qualified 6th. And that's after he said that he was bringing a couple of things tested after the Jerez Grand Prix that Marc Marquez has already been using. And it was supposed to bring him closer to Marquez. But then qualifying 6th, he blamed himself for that. And, you're going to be fighting others that you don't want to fight, especially not in the beginning of a sprint, because you want to be at the top of the field. But he won 2 places in the first lap, so it was 4th, and then out of the blue, he just lost the front again. And I think his comments afterwards were damning when he said that this bike doesn't give him any information, as he said. I think he meant it doesn't give me feedback. And I think those are the most damning words we've heard him speak about this year's Ducati. And yeah, I mean, we've discussed it several times already this season. It just doesn't seem to happen for him on this bike, and it doesn't seem that there's a quick solution.
No, and it's a complete conundrum because you can see Todozzi and Gigi, they're kind of saying, it goes, well, the bike's not really that different. There's a very few small things changed. Now, I'm thinking it must be the engine characteristic, how it's going in and the engine braking, because they're like the one thing they have homologated, I hate saying that word, homologated, from the GP24 is the engine. So the engine is slightly different, and this is what's preventing him from going back to the 24. I don't think they can. I don't actually think that's a possibility. So rather than chase his old feeling, he did say, didn't he, before the weekend, he's now made an admission that, like, he was like, well, I've admitted I finally realised that I can't get what I want from the GP25 and my old feeling, so I just have to now adapt to it. And I think it's a strange mentality to have, Trumpets. Like, why? Surely he would have just gone for it and tried to adapt with what he had from the first round, but he seems to be reluctant to do that.
Yeah, I mean, drivers can be very finicky about the feedback that they require from their various rides. And one thing I do know is that it really is, especially when it comes to suspension and stuff like that, even little changes can sometimes take away that where it's most important to the rider. If you just reduce by a few percent the feedback they get, they can go from being absolutely on it and unstoppable to just completely lost and having to almost fly by instruments. You know, it's not the feel any longer. I have to pick a breaking point and I have to do this exactly here. And if I don't, then I suddenly get a different characteristic into the entry of the corner that I'm used to having. And then your confidence goes. So it wouldn't surprise me, even if it's a little change with the engine. And I know they have a different swing arm, slightly different suspension angles, anything like that. And even as you say, just like different use of engine braking or stuff like that. That's really all it's going to take potentially to throw someone, because you're so at that level, you are so sensitive. You have to be. You couldn't ride that close to the edge of the motorcycle if you didn't have that sensitivity. And if you just take a little bit away, suddenly you can't safely put it in the margin that you're used to putting it in. And then that's a downward spiral of, do I have to rethink everything?
Well, I do think the bike's having some impact on it. I've said a few times on the show now, I think it's mentally. I think he's just broken and he's not used to being... You got to remember, he's been the fastest rider in Ducati for multiple seasons now. He's had everything going his way. All of a sudden, and I don't mean to keep bringing up Marc Marquez, but he's an incredible rider. He has got an incredible rider on the other side of the garage. He is now no longer the undoubtable number one rider in the team. He's now got to fight for that position. And I think we had a bit of a chat in the WhatsApp group around it, that I think he's just trying too hard. He needs to focus on what he's good at. Consistency, top threes, being there, banging in the result. And I think he just needs to accept that he's probably not got the pace. Well, we know he doesn't have the pace of a Marc Marquez. Focus on beating Alex, because Mark will more than likely take himself out of quite a few races and capitalise on the mistakes what he makes. Whereas at the minute, I think he's trying to find something he can't find, and the more he tries, the more mistakes he makes. And although he did have a bit of contact in turn two, I think he would have gone down anyway. It looked like he was starting to go before. I think it was Bastianini what kind of just tapped him on the side as he went down, or it looked quite close when they were going through the corner. So it's a shame for Pecco, as we've said. I really like him as a guy. I really like him on the bike. I like watching him win a race. He's a masterclass riding round, but the guy's just got to focus on himself and knuckle down and start to find something with the bike, because the excuses are starting to wear thin now. You know, he's got easily the most or the best bike in the paddock. He just needs to get on and find some results.
Yeah, he's been lauded for being a rider that is so methodological and
Methodological.
Thank you.
A lot of syllables in that one, Jules.
A lot. And he needs to understand what's happening in order to understand how to improve and get better and how to make the best of what he's got. And I think that's very opposed to how Marquez is able to ride. He said it before the weekend, like Marquez can ride a tractor and make it go fast. And in that aspect, I don't think he has a lot of benefit from Marquez as a teammate, because he doesn't need to solve the problem because he can ride around it, while Bagnaia needs to understand what's happening. And maybe this is something that he can't change that quickly, because you're used to operating like that, and you sincerely from within yourself have the need to understand what's happening. It's not like you can switch that off and start to ride in a different way. So it must be dark times for him, and it's just such a shame, because, as we said before, we can't really see Alex taking the title fight down the wire.
No, it's a tough one for Pecco. It's like he's playing his own ball game in his own backyard. Suddenly someone else is in it. He goes, no, we're playing this game and playing these slightly different rules now, and you've got to deal with it. And it's tough for him, Trumpets. It must be very, very, very tough.
It's extraordinarily tough, but he's a 3-time world champion. He has more mental reserve and resolve than I think we're necessarily giving him credit for right now. And the thing about him that I've always appreciated is that he's an extraordinarily classy and open and honest individual. And you shouldn't ever mistake the one thing for the, oh, I'm broken and I don't know what to do. He knows what to do. I'm sure he has a plan of action. I'm sure he's working with the engineers, and they're trying to target the areas and give him the feedback he needs to be on pace with Alex and Mark. And he doesn't strike me as someone who's just going to give up and roll over. It might take more time than we'd like, and I'm certain more time than he'd like, to find a solution, but I don't see he will admit when he's lost the battle, but I don't see any kind of sign of quit in him.
No, he hasn't. So there was certainly no sign of quit in Marc Marquez either, who kept up his stunning whitewash of the sprint races, and so Marc Marquez ends up winning, snatching the championship lead back from his brother Alex Marquez. Normal service resumed, you'd say, in the sprints this year. Aldeguer, fantastic debut, podium in third. Fabio Quartararo hanging on to fourth, which again is still a really good result. Fourth. Vinales fifth. Again, it's no fluke. We're all waiting for him to vanish, but he hasn't vanished yet. And Zarco sixth, which is good considering I think he was 12th or 11th on the grid. He come through to sixth, and just maybe a precursor for some better things to come. But of course, Vinales and Zarco were promoted because Acosta was looking really good. And during the sprint, we did have a cool 3-way KTM fight between Binder, Acosta, and Vinales, which is looking really good and spicy. But Acosta bins it needlessly on the final turn. I couldn't believe when I watched him back. He's got him way too much speed. He's been taking some hints of stupid mistakes from Marquez's book there, because just needless, and threw away a lovely P5. But he wasn't too unhappy. He said at least the performance is coming back. So I think they've migrated more towards Maverick Vinales' bike. But that wraps up the sprint, and we'll move on to some big topics in our Grand Prix review. So then, well, what shall we talk about? There's a couple of subjects we want to talk about, and the first one we have to focus on, Johann Zarco. What an unbelievable fairy tale win in absolute chaos. Now, before I bring the panel in, I'm going to attempt. Now, if I get this wrong, feel free to tell me if I'm wrong. I'm going to attempt to try to sum up how on earth Zarco ended up leading the race. So the start craziness. There's new rules. So they went to the grid, and the first formation lap, they were all on slick tyres. It was dry. It started to rain. So every single rider coming to the pit lane, and they red flagged it. They all had to change onto their wet tyres and onto their wet bikes for safety grounds. Then there was a quick restart procedure. But at the end of the sighting lap on there, the track had dried. The track was dried up. 13 riders pitted to switch back to their slick bike and take the double long lap penalty hit. So this is a new rule that's come in after the shenanigans of Kota. So there's a new rule to try to penalise riders disturbing the start sequence. And they've also 13 riders, including the Marquezes and Quartararo, the pole-sitting home favourite, and Aldeguer. So 13 riders all chose to change back to slicks. But there were several riders who chose not to. There was 8. So Zarco, with Bagnaia, Jack Miller, Oliveira, Nakagami, Rins and Bezecchi all stuck with their wet bike and went to the grid. So they had no penalty. They were starting on wet tyres on a dry track. The outlier here was Lorenzo Salvadori, who had initially just chosen stayed on a dry bike, which was a bit bizarre, but was he got to lose? Why not roll the dice and have a crazy thing? So he stayed with his slick, so he didn't get a double long lap penalty either. Right, so the race, a new sighting lap happened. All the riders now who have a double long lap penalty but have chosen to start on slicks get to go round. They do a warm-up lap and they get to start in their original grid position. So you have a topsy-turvy mixed grid with half of them on wets, half of them on slick tyres on a drying track with impending rain. You couldn't write it. So the race gets going, and the absolute craziness that happened, it was just just as the race got going, spits of rain starts to happen. Unbelievably, Rins, Marini and Bezecchi, who subsequently, well, hindsight's a great thing, had made the right tyre choice, chose to come in on lap 2 to change to slicks. Massive dole, like massive Homer Simpson dole. Don't know how they did that. Jack Miller was looking, for all intents and purposes, like he was in pole position. He was the top wet runner. He was 9 seconds ahead of Zarco. 9 seconds ahead of Zarco, doing really well. But on lap 4, heartbreak. Quartararo goes down, Binder goes down, people start going down. It starts raining. So at the end of lap 6, the Marquezes decide to pit. Whilst unseen from the cameras initially, Miller bins it at the treacherous final corner. So when it all ends up wrapping out and all filters out, basically, Zarco ends up with an 8-second lead on wet tyres ahead of the Marquezes on wet tyres. Now, sorry, I can bring the panel in now. So this is, we arrived to this point. Zarco's got an 8-second lead at his home race, the crowd going mad on wet tyres that he probably could have burnt out on the dry track. And he's got an 8-second lead. Now, I'm going to ask the same question I asked in the sprint. Who here thought he was going to go on to win? Nobody, because I certainly didn't. I thought Marquez was going to think Jules. Did you, from here on in, did you think surely he can't win? Surely he can't win. Surely he must have burnt out his wets. Did you genuinely think he had it in him to keep it all together, considering what's happened and the crowd roaring at him?
Tough question, because things go through your head like, oh, it's his home race, crowd indeed. He knows this track like none of the other riders still in the race. So you hope so, and the Honda's going well, but when you look who's following him, indeed at 8 seconds, but still it's Marc Marquez on low grip track, slippery conditions, on the best bike of the field. So yeah, you think how many laps will it be? Is he gonna take 2 seconds a lap out of Zarco's lead? Probably. And then you start paying attention to the intervals. And you see, it's not getting less. It's getting 9 seconds, 10 seconds. Okay. And yeah, when I saw that, then I thought, okay, probably Marquez is counting his blessings and not going to do anything stupid to crash out for the second race in a row. And yeah, I mean, he drove so well. It looked like he wasn't taking any risk, but he was stretching his lead, and I thought it was great for him for what he did for the Honda team, how he's been riding the last couple of races. From that point on, you went like, this can't go wrong anymore. Surely this is too good to be true.
Yeah, I agree that when they switched on the wets and I saw the gap, my first thought was, oh yeah, no, Marquez is going to chase him down. But I will say by the second or third lap, I'd completely changed my tune. I was like, nope, Zarco has this in hand, and as long as he can keep the rubber side down, it's going to be his race. And I have, and don't get me wrong, the amount of jeopardy in riding anything on two wheels on wet pavement, and I'm talking to you as someone who has made a left-hand turn at 2 miles an hour and suddenly found myself lying on the pavement in the middle of a road with traffic coming both directions. Sometimes you really don't know what's going to happen. But I have a theory. I'm going to run it by you now. And not surprisingly, it's tire-based.
Really?
I think starting on the wets in almost dry condition, let him get them into the perfect window, or maybe even a little bit hot. And as the rain came, it cooled it off, and he had it dead to rights. Whereas Marquez is coming out on cold, wet tires and having to build up the temperatures in the tires. And that, especially given the conditions and the temperatures, that can be a real challenge. We've seen people come out and qualifying in other sports, put on new tires and be slower because they can't get the temperature into the tires fast enough. So I think that might have played into why that gap began to widen, and also why Mark, when he said, yeah, I pushed and I couldn't really make inroads, so I just thought, oh, you know what? I should probably concentrate on just not falling off for once. I think that may have played a very big role because his tires were absolutely in the pocket for when the rain came.
Interesting. On the flip side of that, he could go too far, couldn't he? So, like Danny, started on wet tyres on a dry track. It's so easy just to annihilate them, basically, and just absolutely rip them up.
Yeah, that was why I didn't think he was going to win it. I was really hit the front, and I thought, brilliant. He's got a great chance now to win the race. And then I looked at the lap count and thought, oh, that's quite a lot of laps to run that wet tyre in the dry. That tyre must have had the edges ripped off, arguably not far from an Inter, I should imagine, when you look at it from a motorsport point of view. And he was just brilliant. But I thought he had a chance when he was first hit there and they come out the pits. But I think, like everybody, I thought Marquez was going to gobble him up pretty quick because it's quite a long time to go in the race. But what got me understanding that he was going to win the race was when Alex started closing Mark down, and I thought, Mark's thinking long game here, because I expected him to bolt and put a big gap between Alex, gobble Zarco up. I think it was very quickly. It was only a lap or two, and I thought, wow, Alex is really closing Mark down. I thought, he settled. He just looked like a rider who'd settled for the position. Bagnaia's out. Alex is behind him. I'll take the points and I'll live to fight another day and let Zarco obviously have it.
And remind me what happened to Alex as he was closing down Mark.
We can talk about that a little bit later in our next subject. But yes, absolutely. To go back to Trumpets' theory of he could have got temperature into those tyres, then yeah, I think there's a slight logic to that. Obviously, they have tyre warmers, but the bikes have been sitting there in the pit lane, revving, and they would have lost tyre temp, and you'll never get the tyres up to proper sort of racing temp anyway. So there is something in this. And about keeping the tyres alive, Zarco said he was very, very aware of this on the dry track, being really cautious. That's why he didn't bother engaging his ride height device off the start. He purposely got a slow start. And let's not forget, he almost crashed at turn. He almost got taken out. He was through the gravel, damaged his handlebar as well, and said he lost some of the electronics on the handlebar as well. So he was pretty much dead last, and basically just I mean, that must take quite a lot of mental resolve of just like, the rain must come, I cannot push. So he was probably going slower than he needed to. Hence, he was 9 seconds behind Miller before Miller crashed. By the way, Miller was absolutely kicking himself over that. So Zarco played it really, really cleverly there. And yeah, there was a lot of time left in the race. There was, when the Marquezes come out of the pits, Jules, there was 20 laps. He had 20 laps to go to hold off the charging brothers.
Yeah, and when you saw they weren't able to close him down, because I think it was lap 6 or 7 when the Marquez brothers came in.
Lap 6, yeah.
And he just gradually kept building the lead. And by that time, the only thing, apart from crashing out in tricky conditions, was if the rain wouldn't have persisted and it would slightly dry up, because Zarco and the Marquez brothers were on soft wets. But both KTM's, Acosta and Vinales, who were pretty strong at the I think the third quarter of the race, about that time, they were mediums. And if the track would have dried out and it wouldn't have kept raining, then those soft wets would have gone pretty quickly, and the KTM's on the mediums would have had a better chance of staying at a certain pace. But yeah, his luck was that it just kept on, drizzling or pouring here and there, and then was that turn, and then it was another turn. And he I think he must have sang a little song inside his helmet every time he noticed that a track was getting wet somewhere, and save his tires a bit.
I have to say, I bet Zarco didn't think he was going to win the race when he took off the line at the start, because you put yourself in his shoes, you're riding around thinking, I've made a really bad decision here. And when he's seeing everybody bolt for the pits to get the slicks on, he's probably thinking, I'll roll the dice and see how we're going to go. But yeah, I bet he ain't got much confidence lap 2 or 3 riding round.
No, it was really interesting, just before we go to Trumpets, of what he said. Of what he said after the race, that he said Lucio Cecchinello, like the team manager, the team owner, is actually a pilot, an amateur pilot, and he has some of the meteorological like pilot sort of apps, which is really good for the weather. And he was the one who was like, it's definitely going to rain. Like, it's definitely going to rain. So he had a bit of insider knowledge there, Matt, to take that calculated risk. And I do think that was the risky option, was starting on the wets on a dry track.
It's like taking all your money for the night, and the first thing you do is put it all on a single number on the roulette wheel. And when you hit, boy, that's going to be a good night for you. But it's real easy to lose it all that way. And yeah, but as a rider, and especially if you look at how Honda's been doing, as a rider, you talk to the strategists and they're all like, yeah, if you say you've got a 1 in 10,000 chance of winning, or you have a 1 in 3 chance of finishing 6th, they'll be like, I'll take the 1 in 10,000 chance, please. They're not real bright about it.
I have to say as well, he didn't just win, he absolutely demolished everybody. He was like a man possessed at the front of that field. And I felt like Hodgie, I must admit. I was watching it when I thought he could win the race. And every lap, 1.4, 1.5, I was like Hodgie said, I was going, slow down. He's done. Just reel off, drop it back to half a second. I was on, the edge of the seat. I've never really get that tense when I'm watching it, because I've never, I like all the riders pretty much the same, but I was biting my nails and everything. I was thinking, just calm down. And I think it was it 2 laps to go or something? He put in a crazy lap time. And I just thought, please back off now, Zarco, because I could just see an Acosta happening, coming like on the last lap or something, having a stupid fall. But then they did say he had 20 seconds, so he could have fell off. That would have been the ultimate. Fall off, get back
amazing,
on the bike.
wouldn't it?
Yeah, still win the race. But amazing. Absolutely amazing. And just one last bit from me. How glorious did that Castrol Honda look leading the race? That livery, just incredible. I could have watched that for another, hour, just going around the track circling. It was perfection watching him ride.
Imagine Jorge Martin on that bike. Oh, sorry guys.
Not
Spoilers.
Yet.
Oof.
Not yet. I agree with you. Like I was, because I like, if it was someone like Marquez, you're like, this is their territory. I would be less nervous watching him go round. But watching Zarco go, and you're just like, and it's such a trap, because if you slow down, you lose the temperature in your tires, and the more worn they are, the quicker they get cold, and the less grip you have. It becomes like such a downward spiral. But I will say, I absolutely held my breath. I was like, please just go like 2 miles an hour through that last corner, because you don't need to go fast now. And everyone has fallen off there.
Absolutely. And the way the coverage is, regardless if you watch it on Dorna or whether you watch it on DAZN or if you watch it in your own language, whatever that may be, or on TNT Sports, they have the cameras, the audio. So when someone crashes, you hear the audio of it. Someone goes down, and particularly on TNT with Hodgson, they were like, "Oh, someone's down," and they instantly know they were just looking for Zarco. They're like, "Please don't make it be Zarco." And yeah, I was on tenterhooks the whole thing. I was so nervous, like everyone else. I'm like, "Please tiptoe." And I mean, who can say this? I don't think there's many riders in the world or in history that can say they dunked 12 seconds on Marc Marquez. They got out and just pulled 12 seconds away. It was absolutely insane.
In the wet.
Yeah, in the wet. Like, it's just like at your home when you're leading home, and you don't need to. That's the thing, you didn't need to. But as Danny said, the only thing that could have made this better is if he'd have crashed, got back on, and still won. That's the only way that would have made it better. But wow, we'll move on a bit from Zarco. Oh, we got one more thing.
Tiny thing, because we haven't mentioned it yet. First French rider to win this race in 71 years. So you just got to wonder, was that in his head too?
Yeah, absolutely bonkers. Well, it's the first French rider to win his home Grand Prix for 71 years. He was the first French rider ever to win at Le Mans, because the other win was at Reims, I believe. So the first French rider to ever win at Le Mans, which is incredible. And that crowd, like, you could hear them just like screaming, and he would have been able to hear it over the engine as well. Just absolutely amazing. And another thing to make it even more of a fairy tale, this is the first race his mother had ever attended, which is absolutely nuts. Imagine that. And I love the scenes in the garage of his dad, who subsequently was missing a tooth, and Zarco had a funny story about that at the end, saying, "My dad lost his tooth a couple of days ago and just said, I just won't smile much, it will be all right." So his dad's getting loads of airtime, and seeing his dad go like in the space of seconds, going, didn't know whether to cry, laugh, sheer panic, like anxiety attack, just watching all of the emotions all at the same time going through his father's face. It was just magical stuff, like absolutely magical stuff. We'll stop lauding about Zarco now, but I could talk about this all day, because I think everyone had a big warm fuzzy feeling. I don't think there was anybody who begrudged that at all. So there were quite a lot of less warm fuzzy feelings in our next topic, and we're going to wrap sort of the three title contenders into one, really. So disaster for Bagnaia, absolute disaster for Bagnaia. We've spoken about a lot of his problems, and we won't focus on that so much, but I think this was really hopelessly unlucky for Bagnaia, because he was one of those riders on the grid that, well, I think was a risky gamble to go on to the wets, which ultimately proved to be the best choice. And why I think that's a risk, and please feel welcome to challenge me on this, but if the rain would have come 2 laps later, it would have been game over. The wets would have been burnt. And also, let's not forget, on the wet bikes, they have a cowling over the brakes, so they've got way less brake cooling and stuff like that. So that's why you can't really ride around on the wet bike on a dry track that much. So I think if the rain was slightly delayed by another 5 minutes, maybe, I think the bikes would have been cooked. They would have cooked their tyres, and it wouldn't have paid off. But the rain come at just the right time for them. So I think that was a bit of a gamble. But I think that's hopelessly unlucky for Bagnaia. And of all people, it was his mate, Bestia, his former teammate, his Italian sort of mate, Trumpets, like making what looks like a ridiculous move up the inside into turn 2.
Bowling Ball and Nini is his new nickname for me. Yeah, it was. I'm still trying to figure out what he was thinking, taking that. Like, he basically made that 4 wide and had no place to be the 4th person, and wound up taking out Bagnaia. When Bagnaia, yeah, I know he would have had to manage the bike, and that might have been part of why you saw him just riding backwards from the start, a la Zarco there. But but I'm just baffled as to what the thought process was there.
I just wanted to say apologies. I got mixed up between the main race and the sprint earlier when I said Bastianini hit Bagnaia and took him out. I forgot about that. It was the
What are you
main
going on
race,
about?
not the sprint race. Too many crashes from Bagnaia to remember. Yeah, just an unlucky weekend for Bagnaia. And what'll hurt even more is he lost 31 points, I think it is, to Mark in the championship. That's a lot of points. He's 51 behind now, and that's going to be a lot of points to try and claw back over the rest of the season. And even worse, at the same spot. I mean, he didn't get past turn 2 in both races. So, yeah, real shame.
Yeah, and it's really hard to claw it back, even when he's already massively on his back foot already and struggling, and now he's got this. But I don't think he could have really avoided the crash. The only way maybe he could have avoided the crash is to qualify a bit better and be on slicks at the start maybe, and not be in, well, what's in car racing was what's affectionately known as the carbon fibre zone, when you're kind of in the middle of the pack and it's the danger zone. Why Bastianini made that mistake, I haven't actually seen any interviews from him since. Bastianini had a shocking race, really, Jules, but I just think he's on slicks, obviously. Bastianini going in there, I think he got caught out by how slow some of the wet runners were in front of him, and he just outbraked himself, and he basically had no choice but to just dive to the apex.
Yeah, he said that he thought Bagnaia braked too early. then I think, well, it's a wet track. Everybody's on different tires. You're not gonna expect in the middle of the pack everybody to brake at the ideal point. You need to take some caution, And you just saw him he shot over the curbs into the side of Bagnaia. Bagnaia taking out Mir, touching, almost taking out Sarko. It was. I will believe that it wasn't anything. How do you say this? Malice of Bastianini, but come on, it's not like you're a rookie. He should have known better. But it just adds to the. Yeah, I guess like Danny said, the spiral Bagnaia's in now, and I was thinking the only good thing to come from this is that he's now at such a deficit compared to
nothing to lose now.
Marc Marquez, that he doesn't need to pressure himself so much to stay in touch with him, and he can now just solely focus on sorting himself out and making something out of the bike and out of the season, and not think about being in that title fight again. I think Matt's right, and probably his head doesn't work like that, and he just wants to fight back, like we've seen him claw back from massive deficits before. But I hope this also makes him find some kind of a peace and get on with himself and the bike.
Just on Bastianini, he got caught out because he's all over the curb. You would not touch that curb with the rain coming down. It's the last thing you would want to be anywhere near. So the fact he goes well on it tells you that I think he just got caught out by Bagnaia being on the wet tyre. He's obviously braked early, trying to stay out of the way, as we've said. And then Bastianini's kind of thought, I can't go right because I'll take multiple riders out. I'll go left and see if I survive. And unfortunately, he didn't.
Yeah, you see the speed carrying in. He come in there a bit like a torpedo. So maybe even if Bagnaia hadn't have braked early, I still think Bastianini outbraked himself. I still think he was hopelessly optimistic in the grip levels going in there, and it's a bit silly. And it's surprising to hear his comments there. It doesn't really sound like he's taking much ownership of the mistake either as well, which is, if I was Bagnaia, apparently after the race they were seen, I think Simon Patterson said it, they hugged it out in the media centre. So there was no hard feelings. And as we've mentioned, and Trumpets alluded to, Bagnaia seems like a classy individual who doesn't do that, particularly with one of his mates. But Jules, I'd be pretty upset if I was Bagnaia with Bastianini after watching the replay.
Yeah, I think it's good that they and that's Bagnaia's style, not to let that drag on for a while. But I don't think he felt like that right after he was taken out. The only thing I think that we are obliged to say on this topic is that Bagnaia shouldn't have been in the middle of that pack. Qualifying sixth is already not great, but then messing up your start like that while you're on the wet tire, it's, when it rains, it pours, isn't it?
I'm not going to go with messing up the start, because starting on the wet tire when it's almost dry is an entirely different thing than starting on a slick. I think I think he explained it to himself, just because at that speed and at that closing speed and with the different tires, it just, your reaction time has to be so perfect to catch it, and it's so easy to miss. And I'm sure he would think back across his career and say, oh yeah, I've done that to somebody else before, and so I know what the other side of that is like. But yeah, that was a complete careless error from Bastianini as far as I'm concerned, and it's a real shame, because Bagnaia was in with a chance to win the whole race, and that would have given us such a more entertaining championship.
That's a good point. I was going to say that I was going to finish up on talking about Bagnaia now, and then he by all intents and purposes could have won that race. He would have had to deal with a very fast Miller, but Miller binned it in the end. So yeah, I think hopelessly unlucky for Bagnaia. He ended up being P16 over the line, just outside of the points, and he carried on. Danny.
Just a very small point on that. I think if Bagnaia was even out front the pace Zarco had, I think he would have just blitzed everybody. I don't think anybody, however the race panned out, with the pace he showed, that 1.5 seconds quicker than everybody, I think Zarco would have still blitzed. I think you could have started Zarco 10 seconds behind and he would, where he was, and he would have still blitzed everybody. He was just different level. So although I think Bagnaia would have had a chance, I think that was Zarco's day.
Yeah, good point, actually. And also, with nothing to lose. Zarco had nothing to lose, and to try and win something at his home Grand Prix, it would have been win or bin for Zarco. Somebody who did have something to lose very much was Alex Marquez, who was sitting pretty really behind his brother in third, and he just started, after Mark gapped him a bit, he was sitting there pretty, and it was a shock. So it was one of the things on the TNT coverage with Hodgson, when they heard a bike go down and they were like, oh my God, there's a bike down. Well, it's not Zarco. Who is it? And they were like, it's Alex Marquez. Like, crazy. He's been bulletproof this season. He's made one tiny mistake at Qatar. And Danny, a nasty sort of off-throttle high side into turn 2, it looked like. But here's a trooper. He got back up and immediately got back on the bike and rejoined P6 after crashing. And he could have just brought that home, but didn't.
Yeah. That was my favourite part. He went down, it's like, oh no. And I'm thinking, oh, Alex, don't do this to me, man. I've been bigging you up all season. Don't do this to me. And then when he got back on the bike and he says, what position? P6, I'm thinking, well, he can afford another fall or two here and be all right. It just went to show how much the field had spread out, because he didn't just hit the deck, get straight back on and carry on. He had a little bit of time trying to get back on the bike and get back into the race. But yeah, I felt for Alex, because he's right on the back of Mark. He's doing what he's done all season. Mr. Consistent. Didn't really like he was pushing too crazy. Looked like he had a bit of a go at him when they first come out of the pits. And then a bit like Mark kind of accepted and went, today's not the day. I'm going to settle for my points. I'm right behind Mark, so minimal loss. And I'll just bring the bike home. And then, treacherous track though, weren't it? I mean, how many riders hit the deck? I mean, that last corner, for example, when, was it 2 or 3 of them when they all went out at the same time? It was just horrific riding around the track. So shame for Alex. I felt for him, but he's a trooper. He'll get back on, and I think, as I've said, I don't think he's looking to take the championship, but hopefully he can keep fighting and taking the fight to his brother.
He's still fallen off less than Mark. I will point that out. and really, I think he just got suckered. I think he got suckered because he was starting to reel him in. And if you're going to talk about a talent difference between the Marquez brothers, it's not extreme in the slightest. But that extra little tiny bit of feel that Mark has, or maybe it's just, I always want to say feel first, because to me, that's the thing that I don't have as much. But maybe it's just, his ability to look at the telemetry after all these years and identify danger points and where he can be a little safer and where he can push a little bit more. Because I believe I heard him say at one point, or maybe you mentioned it in the chat, that he told Aldegar, he said, I knew Aldegar was going to crash there because I looked at his telemetry. So I don't want to take away from that side of it. But But to me, it's just it's that combination where he put it right in the pocket. This is as fast as I can go. And if something goes wrong, I can catch it. And I think his brother was not cognizant, not aware of that little bit faster, put him in a danger zone. And eventually he ran afoul of it.
Yeah, maybe. Alex was he was actually quite chirpy. When you see his interview afterwards, I actually caught that on the coverage. And he owns his mistakes. Well, like Alex, he was like, yep, the first one, he just said I just took a tiny, the track was drying up a bit, the grip was okay, I took a little bit more lean angle, lost the rear, and what was actually quite a nasty high side in the end, and he smashed all the screen, but the bike was pretty bent after that. And then he said the second crash he had, which was quite big actually, he locked the front and went down well over 100 mile an hour, it looked like a really quick crash. But he just said, I was pushing way too hard with a broken bike. And it was just like stupid. I think he's had his Marquez Jerez moment. That may have been like, he was just silly. It was just, he didn't need to. He just said he was over pushing, and you're probably a bit flustered and is trying to claw back the time. But even after a crash, he should have just cashed that P6. So we'll touch a tiny bit on Mark. We've mentioned him a lot, but I don't know what happened there. Mark, I think, learned massively from Jerez and said that he knows himself. He said if he hadn't have crashed in Jerez, he probably would have crashed in this race. And you could see it when he come out. I think Mark was riding at about 90%, 85. As soon as he couldn't beat Zarco, it's like, you know what? And seeing Bagnaia, remember, I think it was on lap 3 or 4, they actually lapped Bagnaia. So he would have seen Bagnaia, knew Bagnaia was out of it. He's obviously got his pit board. He's got his brother semi under control behind him. And, you know, it's his brother. He knows, you know, I don't think he'll mind dropping too many points to his brother, because I think he knows ultimately over a season he's going to spank him. So I think he just rolled it off and played it safe, Jules, and just decided, like, I must stay upright and just cash these points.
Yeah, when he eventually after the flag, the checkered flag, he entered the pit, he like gestured with his finger towards his head, like, oh, I used my head. I've been smart, and I think that indicates that how, despite how casual he was about crashing out at Jerez, and sad that it didn't, affect him or was going to change anything about how he went about things. You don't do that if it hadn't bothered you, and if you didn't self-doubt a bit of how you're going about your business. And I think yesterday illustrated perfectly that he isn't the all or nothing Marquez, or I'm fast and I have points in the bag, but can I get even more? He rode really sensible, and maybe that's to do with what you said, that he knew Bagnaia out, because I think in his heart he knows that his brother wasn't his biggest opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you wouldn't want to be an opponent of this podcast and you actually like what you're listening here, why not give us some feedback or give us a bit of love on the socials? If you're watching on YouTube, click that subscribe button. Don't have to click the bell. We come out every Tuesday, Wednesday, and we'll have a show ready for your midweek commute. But you can send us some feedback, tell us how beautiful we are, at Mr. Apex. That's Mr. Apex Moto at gmail.com. That's Mr. Apex Moto with a capital M at gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, which is Mr. Apex Moto, and I need to pull my finger out and get us over to Blue Sky as well. So why not give the show a bit of love and a bit of a follow?
Well, I immediately want to jump in and say that the funniest thing and the scariest thing that Mark said after he finished was he used the word concentrate. He realized he had to concentrate. And I will say that I bet if you asked him on a lot of his wins, what were you thinking about there, Mark? His answer would be laundry, dinner, flight home. Because I know as a musician, like a lot of times I will ask people and they'll be like, oh no, you made this amazing solo. What were you thinking about? Oh, well, I was thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner. And the fact that he's had this realization and been able to implement it is really the scariest thing for his opponents.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And somebody who was thinking and concentrating is our next subject. I really want to talk about Aldeguer. Absolutely amazing. Like, he's a rookie this season. We saw great signs in Kota in sort of mixed conditions, but this is his first flag to flag race. And he said to his crew chief, don't expect anything because we don't know what's going to happen. But 2 podiums. He comes back and grabs a podium and passes Acosta. He closed Acosta down so quickly, and he actually was the fastest guy by, I think, considerable margin towards the end of the race, Aldeguer. And one thing I want to point out about him, the kid has pretty big spherical objects, because what he decided to do when on lap 6 the Marquezes decided to pit, and he gets on really well with the Marquezes, and they've given quite a lot of tutoring and stuff like that. They both come into the pits together to change bikes. Aldeguer decided to stay on another lap on slicks on a wet track in your rookie season in a pretty scary track like Le Mans, going into that turn 1 on slicks. Wow, the kid has got some bravery, and actually I think that kind of quite hurt him in the end. That extra lap that he ended up doing on the slicks was really slow, but he come charging back through when he got on the wets. Stunning, Jules, like absolutely stunning. And we were actually at the start of the season, weren't we, tipping him to do some pretty good things, and we're starting to see it now.
Yeah. My go-to thing to say about Fermin Aldeguer is that last season he didn't have a great Moto2 season, and people questioned why he already had the Ducati contract. But the season before that, he was up there with Pedro Acosta. And we all know how Acosta had, what kind of debut season he had. But thing is, he's not a super natural talent like Acosta, at least seemed to be in Moto2 and his debut season. But he is more, Aldeguer is more, maybe more comparable to Bagnaia. He is liked because of the way he goes about things and his riding. And I'm not talking Pecco Bagnaia out of his Ducati seat, but he's 19 years old, right? So I can see how Ducati was, trying to scout maybe a guy
Even in the future,
that in the end could, succeed Pecco Bagnaia, a rider like him, because he's been good to develop that Ducati in the last couple of years into what it is now. So yeah, he's a really interesting rider. And he's portrayed now with the Marquez brothers, the 3 of them on the podium on after the checkered flag. But I think he's pretty different in his way as in which he goes about it.
I think it's funny that you took his extra lap in the rain to be the size of his incredible bravery. Because for me, it was the move on Quartararo after Quartararo shoved him out of the way in the sprint.
Oh,
He just came right back through and said, oh, this is how we play then, fine. But he's had, I think, much more of what you'd think of a rookie, like a really talented rookie introduction to MotoGP. And maybe it's because the bike is harder, maybe it's because the bike is faster. But he's sort of gone and found the limit and said, okay, so that's the limit for that. And then in a new track and a new race, he's found another limit. And he's gotten to that point where he's like, okay, now I understand how to get to the end of the race on this thing. And we're starting to see that. And it's fantastic because it just adds more fun to the mix.
Yeah, and not to keep drawing parallels with him and Acosta, but last season, Acosta just banged onto the scene. Remember, like his first couple of races, we were like, "Oh, he's surely going to win his first Grand Prix this season." And then he kind of faded away. And of course, that's also to do with KTM, but still. And Aldeguer, just like Trumpets said, has done it in the exact opposite way. We know the GP24 is a great bike, probably the best bike on the grid, right? The most complete one. And in the first 2, maybe even 3 races, we were a bit like, oh, where's Aldeguer? As Alex Marquez is doing so well, and he was like further down the road beyond P10, and then steadily in 6 races time, he's a podium contender, and he's challenging the lap times in race trim of the Marquez brothers, and that it shows how good the GP24 is, but also how he gelled into riding that bike.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you said he's a bit of a builder, you could maybe consider him a thinking man's rider. So he's thinking about it, going about it a really good way. He has mentioned quite a lot before that he's had a lot of sort of. I think Alex is helping him a lot, and I think he trains a lot with Mark. He called Mark his idol, and his teammate, and somebody is helping out a lot. So I think they've got a little honeypot going on there, and they're all working really well together. And it's interesting to hear that I didn't actually know that him and Acosta don't like each other. They're very much, considering they grew up and they together in the same region. They come from the same town, I think they do. So they're really but there's a big rivalry there. But Acosta, I think, doesn't get on massively well with a load of other. Acosta's quite a unique character, I think, and sort of does his own thing, which I like about him. I think it's a plus point. So yeah, Aldeguer, amazing, and we're going to see some big things coming from this kid. He is really, really good, and it's brilliant to see. So we'll move on to our final topic here, and we've got some saucy stuff to talk about here. So we've got some honourable mentions. Let's deal with the Quartararo heartbreak start thing, because nightmare. It was lap 4, I think it was, and he went down at that treacherous final corner on the polished tarmac with Binder. Binder got his bike going again in the gravel trap. Now, Quartararo couldn't get his bike going in the gravel trap now, and some footage has come out, and we've seen this afterwards, that he is freaking out at the marshals, trying to get a bump start and get the bike again. And it's not a great look. Like, I don't blame. Yeah, look, the heat's on. You're at his home Grand Prix. You've crashed out, and let's not forget, Quartararo was leading, and he was only down in, I think it was 3rd or 4th when he crashed, because he was the only one to take the first of his double long lap penalties, and he had quite a lead. So actually, Quartararo was net leader of the race when he went down, and I think that's why he was so upset. But he couldn't get the bike going again, and the stewards have given him a bit of a bizarre penalty where he has to miss the first 10 minutes of practice at the next race at Silverstone, which is a bit of an odd one, but because he endangered the marshals. But I think he needed some sort of penalty, and I think that's a sporting-ish penalty, which doesn't really hurt him too much. But it's more of the principle of the thing. It's like, yes, you can't endanger our marshals. They know best. Don't be an object to the marshal, shall we say. I was going to say a rude word there, but yeah. So, but one thing, Quartararo, he calmed down nicely, and he congratulated Zarco, and was still quite chirpy at the end of the race. So, so bad from him. Really unfortunate. Agura deserves a mention, getting a P10 from a really messy weekend and coming through to a P10. And somebody who deserves a mention, before we get on to our final thing we're going to talk about, Taka Nakagami, having a wild card ride, gets his second best ever result in MotoGP with a P6. Absolutely brilliant. Obviously made all of the right decisions, but I just think it's the irony that Nakagami goes on expecting to kind of be last and gets his second ever best result. But there was some shocking news we found out today, and that is that it looks like Jorge Martin is trying to leave Aprilia. So we're going to stop talking about the race and do some surmising about the future. Jules dropped this in our group chat earlier. Jules, what's going on?
So this morning, the news was broken by 2 very respectable Spanish journalists, and I think they must have a hotline with the Jorge Martin camp, because I believe these are the same guys that broke the story of him signing for Aprilia and not getting that Marc Marquez seat at Ducati factory team. So thing is, apparently, and we're going to try and summarize this for our listeners, Jorge Martin was at Le Mans this weekend, just not at the track or at the paddock. But he traveled towards the circuit, or where the action was, and he traveled there to have several meetings. And one of those meetings was with Aprilia, and he said that he wanted to use a clause in his contract that said that if he wasn't at the top or in the top ranks of the standings, aka fighting for the championship, I guess, or being a challenger, after 6 races, that he was able to listen to offers from other teams. Now, obviously, Jorge Martin has done only one Grand Prix, and unfortunately didn't finish that. So obviously he's not a top-ranked rider in the standings at this point. And obviously upsetting Aprilia, who believe that they can legally keep him to his contract as he hasn't really ridden for them due to his injuries. But the question now is, what were the other meetings? And from the reports, we understand that one of those meetings was with Honda, and that Honda has also had a meeting with Aprilia to try and figure this stuff out. Now, Honda is the only team basically to go to next season, as Luca Marini is out of contract at the end of this season. Most contracts run to 2027. So that's what we know. Aprilia not happy. Honda doesn't want to get involved until Martin has legally sorted his stuff with Aprilia. And if that doesn't happen, then other teams in Jorge Martin's eyes can approach him as well.
Well, I love nothing better than being extremely controversial on the basis of no evidence whatsoever. But the first thing I'm going to say is everybody is like, oh my goodness, how could you do that to Aprilia? But honestly, he's been on the bike how many times? And every time it's just basically tried to kill him. So, maybe he has a point there. No, that's a joke. I'm fascinated to see from a legal point of view how this plays out. And it's really going to be down to what kind of lawyers did Jorge have versus what kind of lawyers did Aprilia have. We've seen these things go both directions. And I don't know. I mean, if I'm Aprilia, I very much wanted that number one plate. I wanted him riding for me. But if he really doesn't want to be there, then what I want is a bucket full of money from Honda. And the question is, will they provide it?
Yeah, it's harsh. And I believe it is harsh to Aprilia because essentially Jorge Martin has put himself out of the thing. It's his essential, if you break it down, it's his mistakes and how he's come about not racing for them. Aprilia have been paying his wages for him to essentially be on the sofa. Of course, it's not the sofa, it's a hospital bed, unfortunately, for Jorge Martin, but they've not got anything out of him. They've not got star value. They've not much to do much promo or PR. And now he's saying he wants to leave. That doesn't really sit very well with me, to be honest. But it's juicy news, and we've got a lot of speculation, Jules, to talk about in coming episodes.
We do, and if we know one thing for sure, then it is that Jorge Martin and his camp has pulled this trick before. When he was in Moto2, he had a KTM contract, and he had a contract to ride for them in MotoGP, and he got out of it to move to Pramac Ducati because he had a clause that was like this. He had to be in the top 10, I believe, of the rider standings at a certain point of the season, but there weren't any standings because COVID prevented any event from happening, and he got out of the contract like that.
I'm with you, Kyle. I think it don't sit well with me either. I think from a world champion as well, I'd expect a little bit more respect to the team that he signed for. I just wanted to say that the worst part about the story is he's looking at going to Honda. Yamaha could have understood it, but Honda, stick with Aprilia, Jorge. Well,
they've just won a race, haven't they? So who knows? But also, I'd like to see a certain Toprak maybe get on that Honda as well. Razgat Dioglu, let's just call him Toprak, who's going to come over from World Superbikes, hopefully, and is going to come over in there. So to wrap up all of the weekend and everything, Marc Marquez has ended up getting a 22-point lead over his brother Alex, and Bagnaia now a whopping 51 points back. Morbidelli, who was on the deck a lot of times, I think this weekend, is 86 back, and Digia, who was we haven't mentioned him at all really, had a bit of a very bad weekend, was all over the place, mainly down the timesheets, wasn't great, and 97 points back. So as always, we like to finish on some awards. So I'm going to go to my panel for their rider of the weekend. Jules, who was your rider of the weekend?
My rider of the weekend is going to go to Pedro Acosta. and that might surprise some people.
Very.
But he adopted Maverick Vinales' KTM setup and style, and bang, there he was on Sunday. So yeah, would be good to see him a bit more of that of him on that position.
Good point. Trumpets, whose was yours?
Well, I was just going to add to the Acosta legend, because is he not coming back from arm surgery as well?
Yeah, good point. He was. Yeah, he's the stitches. He was recovering from arm pump surgery. So, wow. Yeah, good shout, Jules.
I mean,
Trumpets, who was your rider?
You've left me the very obvious home run here. It's got to be Zarco. I mean, geez. Put it in the notes next time, Danny, if you're unhappy. That's all I got to say. I looked at the notes this time, and I took nobody who had an answer in the notes. That's what I'm going to say. Yeah, it's Zarco all the way, 100%. You're in the lead. It's an immense historical thing for your country, for you, for your team. The conditions are so treacherous, and you're so unbothered by all of this. You just go out there and crush Marc Marquez over 20 laps.
Stunning.
In ridiculous conditions. So, yeah, hats off. I don't know if that's a one-off for him, just out of his mind driving, or if he's always capable of that. But it was impressive and nerve-wracking to watch the whole time.
I like to leave it out the notes because I like the emotional roller coaster guessing if someone stole it before I come on. I'm going to go for Quartararo then, just for giving me a bit of hope that he could actually get a result over the line and nick a win.
Nice one. I'm going to go for Aldeguer. Amazing double podium, and he was my rider of the weekend in difficult conditions. So, moment of the weekend. Here we go. Danny, I'm going to go to you first, considering you tend to get the short stick on these ones. What was your moment of the weekend?
I'm going to go for it. Everybody just, what felt like they were continuing to just come into the pits. It got ridiculous at one point. That's my moment. I sat down thinking race is going to rock and roll, and it was like pits. And then here we go, pits. You go, oh my God, come on. So yeah, the craziness of the start.
Brilliant. Trumpets.
Mine has to be involving your favorite rider of the weekend, Aldeguer, smashing into the back of Marquez after the race.
Oh yeah, forgot
and
about
then
that.
and then Mark comes running at him like he's an angry rider, but instead gives him a big old hug, and they have a laugh about it. That was just really fun to watch.
That was excellent. I completely forgot about that. Jules, what was your moment of the weekend?
Johan Zarco's parents. I mean, the first shot of both of them was really good. And we didn't even know the story behind it. And then the second shot of only his dad, and you couldn't make out if he was laughing or crying. Probably both at the same time. I thought it was really, really touching and a cool shot.
Absolutely. Mine was on a similar theme, but it was just the crowd getting their home victory. And as an Englishman, it's not very often we like to doff our caps and say chapeau to our friends over the pond there and over the channel. There's usually a healthy rivalry between it, but it was so good. I don't think anybody would begrudge it. It was so nice to see the crowd going mad and singing Le Marseillaise, I can never say that very well, on the podium, the national anthem, and there was hundreds of thousands of record crowd. It was just, I was almost welling up myself watching it. It was so good. So that was absolutely brilliant. You could make my panel well up if you follow them on the socials. So, Jules, where can people get you?
You can find me on Blue Sky, and the handle is Jules on Racing.
Excellent. Danny, where can people get you?
Find me on X, Danny Henny F1.
And Matt?
At MattPT55 on most of your socials. I will be there.
Absolutely excellent. Well, we will certainly be there again in 2 weeks. We're back to review round 7, the British Grand Prix at the mighty Silverstone. May not be very many fans there. I don't think I'm going to make it there myself, unfortunately, but the race will hopefully be good. As always, thanks for listening to Missed Apex MotoGP.